Hello, everybody. Eid Mubarak, if you're celebrating. I was walking around today in beautiful Hudson County, New Jersey, and saw a lot of interesting, extravagant outfits. So that's always a benefit of a religious holiday going on that you don't yourself partake in. You get to see the garb on display. And the weather's really nice today as well, so that's a additional benefit, although nothing supernaturally related. Anyway, as we move ahead toward impeachment, there are a ton of political considerations associated with that dramatic step that haven't really been fleshed out adequately. And one of them that I've been thinking about and trying to formulate arguments related to is the extent to which impeachment unifies the Democratic Party, or it serves as a balm of kinds on the fractious nature of the Democratic coalition and brings together disparate factions within the party coalition. Because there's a lot of consternation right now among Democrats, whether it's an after effect of the 2016 primaries, whether it's having to do with domestic issues like Medicare for All, whether it has to do with differing interpretations of Obama's legacy and what that portends for Biden. Whole variety of contentious matters on which Democrats can hardly agree. Identity politics, another big bone of contention. But one thing that they can basically all agree on is that they loathe Trump and that impeachment, even if it doesn't culminate in the literal removal of Trump from office, meaning you would require conviction by the Senate for that, which is pretty darn unlikely. Nonetheless, just the mechanism of impeachment being utilized could have certain political advantages insofar as it heightens pressure on Trump, it keeps his alleged corruptions front and center in the public consciousness, it affords the House of Representatives additional investigative tools that they can use to, pry out new information that could reflect poorly on Trump. And it could lead to a situation where you're constantly having this very provocative political spectacle on display, and therefore you could goad Trump into overreacting or doing something that is contrary to his own political interest and actually weakens him for re-election. Now, I know that there are countervailing arguments which say that actually Trump stands to benefit because the general population is going to perceive Democratic tactics as an overreach, and that's actually going to make Trump stronger going into re-election. I don't think that's a settled argument. It's entirely speculative. I think there are decent points to be made on both sides of that, and I've made some of them. Regardless, though, in a party coalition that is undergoing not a crisis of identity exactly, but is having a lot of heated internal debates right now, which are only going to intensify as the Democratic primaries wear on, impeachment actually serves as a unifying force. And I think that could be part of the reason why more and more people are adopting it. And one reason that how you know that it's a unifying force is factions within the party who support impeachment are not just the progressives or the left or socialist elements of the party. And I think that's a misnomer you hear in the media a lot. That somehow you're placating the base of the party, meaning the progressives, by moving forward with impeachment. First of all, progressives arguably don't even comprise the base of the party. The base of the party are instinctual Democrats who like Obama a lot and and don't necessarily have fully formed left-wing ideological principles. To the extent that left-wingers exist within the Democratic Party coalition, I think it would be misguided to even call them a base, because they don't have a specific attachment to the party. They just want to use the party as a vehicle for achieving their desired ends. Whereas the base of the party actually does have an attachment emotionally to the Democratic Party, mostly in the form of strong affinity for the previous Democratic president and his vice president. But, even going back further, they're just kind of traditional Democrats in a way. And I think it's an oversimplification to say that they are progressives. I think progressives exist within the coalition, but calling them the base would probably be it wouldn't be fully accurate. But look at some people who have endorsed impeachment recently, or at least the initiation of impeachment proceedings, and you'll understand why this is actually something that's being promoted not just within the progressive elements of the coalition, but within the moderate, quote-unquote, elements of the coalition, and people who are opposed factionally to the upswell in socialistic sentiment. So 2 presidential candidates endorsed it within the past day or two. Those would be Tim Ryan, who's a Democratic member of Congress from Ohio, and not a high-profile candidate, obviously, but he's running, at least in part, because he feels as though he, as the member of Congress representing Youngstown, Ohio, has unique insights on what it takes to appeal to voters who are perceived as having coalesced around Trump in 2016 and enabled him to win in states that had been longstanding Democratic strongholds. With Youngstown almost being like a cliched example of the deindustrialized Midwest. And Tim Ryan represents Youngstown. And he's not going to be a left-wing ideologue who's like inclined to, jump on a bandwagon with the likes of AOC or Rashida Tlaib. He's coming from a different standpoint in the party, and he endorsed initiation of impeachment proceedings yesterday. And remember, I think on Sunday he endorsed it. And remember, he's got to be somebody who has to be mindful of the sentiments of Trump voters in a way, because that's his whole conceit for running, that he can actually appeal to their grievances, but get them to vote for Democrat. And he endorsed it, as did yesterday John Hickenlooper, the former 2-term governor of Colorado, who on paper should be a very formidable candidate. I mean, sure, he doesn't have a huge national name recognition, but he was the governor for 8 years of Colorado, which is a attractive state now. We have a lot of interstate migration going on to Colorado. So people from other states are moving to Colorado. Its economy is relatively good compared to other states. It has a high quality of living compared to other states. And Hickenlooper at least can somewhat plausibly make the claim that the policies he implemented over 8 years contributed to the comparatively good standing that Colorado now has. But Hickenlooper is a business guy. I actually spoke to him briefly in New Hampshire, in March. He was the mayor of Denver. He was then the governor of Colorado, but he has a business background. He's a small businessman. He has, a brewery business. So he's not a guy, he's more into the entrepreneurial spirit and kind of casting that in democratic terms rather than supporting socialism. So, on paper, you'd think he'd actually have a good chance to at least carve out a niche within the party among people who don't like Trump, want a Democrat who can win, who has executive experience, but also don't want to capitulate entirely to the loud voices, so to say, for socialism or a more avowedly left-wing outlook. And so it wouldn't make sense for him to given the type of voters he's trying to court, it wouldn't make sense for him to willy-nilly just say, oh yeah, impeach Trump, resist. But nonetheless, he came out and said, yeah, they should initiate impeachment proceedings in the House. So that's a moderate who was just at the Democratic convention this past weekend in California and got booed for saying that we should not embrace socialism. He is now endorsing initiation of impeachment proceedings. So if he is now united with other Democratic candidates in the party who are trying to appeal to the more left-wing elements, then that tells you something in terms of the unifying capability that this issue has within the party. And now it's almost a foregone conclusion that there's going to be some action taken on this, because you can't have Pelosi in a situation where she's seeing virtually every major presidential candidate running as a Democrat except Biden. And, Tulsi is still somewhat low in the polls. She's not endorsing impeachment proceedings, but not because she's a moderate, so to say, but for her own idiosyncratic reasons, which I agree with. So she's kind of in her own separate category. But Pelosi's watching this coalescence of all various kinds of Democrats of different stripes now saying, yeah, let's impeach. And she can't withstand that pressure for long. I think if you look at what James Clyburn said on Sunday, he's the majority whip, which is an extremely powerful position within the Democratic caucus. Clyburn has massive seniority. He works hand in hand with Pelosi. You could say he's the third ranking member of the House. He told Jake Tapper that he believes impeachment is inevitable, essentially, and it's just a matter of timing. Now, he had a meeting with Pelosi after that, and he kind of modified his position a bit. But nonetheless, if you just at least take that statement at face value, yeah, it's got to be the case that this is just going to... It's only a matter of when Pelosi chooses to initiate the impeachment proceedings, not if it will happen. And if it does not happen, I would be very much surprised. Again, initiation of the proceedings, not impeachment itself. There's a distinction there. And they're already doing stuff that would precede the initiation of impeachment proceedings, like wheeling out John Dean, this Watergate character who's made an entire career based on the fact that he did something notable in 1974. And who's now a TV pundit, writes a book. I remember first seeing him on TV during the George W. Bush years, where he wrote a book called Worse Than Watergate, where he was saying that, Bush and Cheney were worse than Watergate, which, I think is actually true. Watergate was trivial compared to what Bush and Cheney did. But Bush and Cheney was never even seriously considered that they would be impeached, notwithstanding Dennis Kucinich's best efforts. But John Dean's just a guy who's just gets trotted out because he had this headline role during the Nixon years 45 years ago. But for some reason, the House Judiciary Committee is going to bring him to testify next week. What unique insights John Dean has on Robert Mueller or the Russia investigation, I don't know. I can't imagine that he has any. But they're doing it for a theatrical purpose because they want it to be a precursor to impeachment proceedings. Because John Dean was a key player in the impeachment proceedings that were undertaken during Richard Nixon's tenure. And Nixon was never actually impeached, but the impeachment proceedings were initiated for him. So what could be Pelosi's tactical maneuver here? Well, if she thinks it's a given now, as Clyburn suggested, that impeachment proceedings will be initiated, in terms of timing, there are a number of things to have to bear in mind strategically. Do you want to initiate impeachment proceedings so that they're at their peak in the summer, when more, comparatively more people are going to be tuned out of the news? I don't know. I think that it might make more sense to kind of delay and slow walk it until after Labor Day, when then you could initiate the formal proceedings, and it's going to draw comparatively greater attention than it would during the dog days of summer, especially because Congress has a recess every year in August. Now, theoretically, they could cancel the recess, but that's hard to believe. So I mean, I think if you're Pelosi and you're saying to yourself, okay, it's only a matter of time, what is the best time? Strategically, I would say probably after Labor Day, and let's do some theatrical run-up in the meantime, like wheeling out John Dean to do something. I don't know. And then if you look at the people who have endorsed within the House who have endorsed impeachment recently, who are not running for president, they also give you indication of how unifying this is for the party, specifically the House caucus. Lloyd Doggett, Democrat from Texas, a longtime representative from Austin area, endorsed it, not a left-wing ideologue. Benny Thompson, longtime representative from Mississippi, the Mississippi Delta area. No, not a left-wing ideologue. He's the chair of the Homeland Security Committee. Madeline Dean, who just is a freshman representative, it represents portions of Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, which is an affluent area. She's not an ideologue by any stretch. Tom Malinowski just got elected to represent a Republican-leaning area of north/central New Jersey, where he unseated a longtime Republican incumbent. Also not a left-wing ideologue. These are more people in the moderate wing who nonetheless have an issue that they can rally around that puts them in league with their more, left-wing colleagues. I try to stress that this is not an inherently left-wing view to want to impeach Trump. And again, I'm not saying you have to be left-wing or it have to be anything, but I'm saying there's nothing about a left-wing position that makes it inevitably follow that you have to support impeachment of Trump on the basis of anything related to Mueller, especially given what I think is the incontrovertible reality that the whole Mueller investigation stemmed from a militaristic conspiracy theory generated by the FBI and CIA. So you're actually bolstering establishment narratives by impeaching Trump on those grounds. I don't see what's left-wing about that. But what this gives left-wingers the ability to do is to be screaming day to day about the same stuff that MSNBC is screaming about. So it kind of shrinks the gulf between them and MSNBC, which is more roughly establishment liberal, and kind of strengthens their cohesion as a coalition or as a unified force. And you can see why they want to do that in the context of a presidential primary, because you want party unity to defeat Trump. Anyway, that does it for now, I suppose. Remember to, if you so please, subscribe on Patreon, contribute via PayPal, subscribe to the podcasts via iTunes and Stitcher. I'm going to have a new episode out on Thursday on an interesting topic. And subscribe here on YouTube. That would be wonderful. Okay, talk to you later.